Isn't it comforting to know that there's one place in the American landscape that's open 24/7 for anyone and everyone? And that's the diner. More than just an eatery, the diner has transformed into a historical and cultural icon, symbolic of the resilient American spirit. From its humble horse-drawn carriage beginnings to becoming the most familiar spot you'd see on highways, the diner stands as a monument of American culture. It has lived through so many drastic shifts in the last 151 years, but has remained a constant favorite in the food industry. What about you? Any particular diners you frequent in your neighborhood? And what's on their menu that you'd recommend? Hello and welcome to History of Life, where we relive history's greatest moments and the eras in between. Today we're going to gobble up this sizable feast that is the diner, and dig in on how this American landmark has evolved through generations of patrons. The moment you walk in, you can already sense it, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee as pancakes and bacon sizzle over the griddle. The upbeat sounds of jukebox music wafting around, and the colorful sight of neon signs amid chrome countertops and checkered floors. Ah, yes. Welcome to the diner, the quintessential dining spot for families, communities, and just about everyone. If comfort food is what you're craving for, there's no better place to be in than here. Beyond cheeseburgers, french fries, and malt shakes, the diner also offers not-so-usual fares that could tickle any gastronomist's taste buds. Specialty fares like crab cakes, quesadillas, or chicken souvlaki may not sound like something you'd order for brunch, but believe it or not, these menu items have helped the diner bounce back from a period of decline. The diner has really changed a lot through the last century and a half. But how did it even come to be in the first place? The diner that we've come to know today looks nothing like its original form. Even the menu was far from what it was back then. You see, when the first diner prototype came to life in 1872, there wasn't even a place to sit. It was just a simple, light freight wagon drawn by a horse that served patrons with light snacks from the back of the cart. This was the brainchild of Walter Scott, a Providence, Rhode Island local with an entrepreneurial spirit. When Walter was just 11, he helped to augment his widowed mother's income by peddling fruits, candy, and newspapers on the streets. Later on, he became a full-fledged businessman when he used up his savings from his printing press job to procure his horse-drawn wagon. This was after Walter keenly observed that late-shift workers and drunken partygoers had no options to grab hot meals from during the wee hours of the night. Thus, his night lunch wagon was born in 1872, and during the graveyard shift, Walter would park it in front of the Providence Journal downtown. Walter's night lunch wagon was a hit. Soon, his idea spread out beyond Providence, crossing over to other northeastern cities like Worcester in Massachusetts, where it found much success. Thomas Buckley from Worcester was among the first to build upon the manufacturing of lunch wagons for purchase by hopeful entrepreneurs. He created the White House Cafe wagons, a famous line of lunch wagons with a more updated design that even got sold all the way to the West Coast. Because of the lunch wagon's popularity, many regular establishments considered them a nuisance as they clogged up the streets, not just at night but even in the daytime. This made vendors park their lunch wagons at their own private spots permanently for the first time. Among the oldest diners still operating today that had their roots from the original lunch wagon are Casey's Diner in Natick, Massachusetts, which started in 1890 as a four-stool, horse-drawn wagon. And Haven Brothers Mobile Diner in Providence, which began in 1893, that's now a modern-day lunch wagon, aka food truck. When the 1920s rolled around, the diner had its first major revolution. The lunch wagon was now completely stationary, ditching its wheels. It also started becoming known as a dining car because by this time, the eatery was closely influenced by the train. As it happened, railroad travel was also at its peak in the 1920s. It was the mode of transportation highly favored by the general public. From this, the lunch wagon was emulated to look like the dining cars inside trains, where passengers would wine and dine during long interstate trips. It was Jerry O'Mahony from New Jersey who popularized this dining car aesthetic thanks to his eminent Jerry O'Mahony Diner Company. It's even said that the signature traditional diner look, the roadside, rectangular-shaped structure designed with large windows, is a Jerry O'Mahony creation. Jerry O'Mahony's prefabricated dining cars had a built-in kitchen and indoor seating, which appealed to more female customers compared to the lunch wagon, which mostly had working-class men and late-night male partygoers as its patrons. Shortly in 1924, the term dining car was dropped for the shorter and catchier name, simply diner. The Jerry O'Mahony Diner Company was so successful in its heyday, and was also credited for being one of the main reasons why New Jersey became the diner capital of the world. Sadly, there are only about 20 Jerry O'Mahony original dining cars that still exist today, with the most popular ones being Crystal's Diner in Dumont, New Jersey, which was built in 1932. Seaplane Diner in Rhode Island, wherein it's hard to miss the actual aircraft that sits on its roof. And Summit Diner in New Jersey, that's been family-owned and operated since 1928. The diner enjoyed a steady period of prosperity afterwards, even during World War II. As the men crossed the Atlantic Ocean to fight in the war, the women took over and were instrumental in running the diner. This change also meant that more waitresses were employed, which helped boost the prevalence of the diner even more. In the 1950s, when the war was finally over, the diner entered its second major evolution. By this time, the diner would become even more popular than ever. GI loans were readily available to servicemen, helping them capitalize on their own diner businesses. Another factor was the migration of many middle and upper-class Caucasian families further out into the suburbs. The diners soon followed them, straying away from the working-class setting in the cities and moving instead to the vast green spaces of suburban America. This physical move also led to significant changes in the diner's function and design. The diner expanded by adding more seating booths so families and larger parties could eat together. And the familiar sight of the line cook grilling burgers was gone because the kitchen was moved to a closed-off area in the back so as not to overwhelm patrons with the smell of grease. The diner's aesthetic also changed considerably around this time. From the railroad age of the 1920s, the diner soon zoomed into the automobile age of the late 1950s. Thanks to the influence of googie architecture, which was at the zeitgeist of design back then, diners heavily drew inspiration from the forms of jets, cars, and even spaceships. And when it came to interiors, diners were all about neon signs, chrome counters, checkered tiles, red upholstery, and funky wall decor. During the civil rights movement, the diner served a critical role when it became a constant meeting place for those active in the movement. The diner's cousin, the lunch counter, would become the key symbol of the civil rights movement, wherein activists would stage their sit-ins. The diner peak in the 1950s was truly emblematic of the rise of the American economy and society. And thankfully, some of the most iconic diners that started in the era are still around today, like Olympia Diner in Newington, Connecticut, which was built in 1954 by the Jerry O. Mahoney Diner Company. Howley's in the West Palm Beach, Florida, that's notable for never having a microwave in its establishment since its inception in 1950. And Pan's in Los Angeles, which is a classic example of googie architecture at its funkiest. Enjoying all this insight about diner culture so far? What's something we shared today that really intrigued you? Well, keep watching as we'll bring you even more mouth-watering details about the diner next. In the 1960s, there was a dramatic shift happening in the American landscape. Anti-war sentiment was the general mood, feminism was on the rise, and rock and roll became the anthem of a generation. Unfortunately, it was also around this time that the diner underwent a period of steady decline. No thanks to its biggest competitor yet, the fast food joint. McDonald's was becoming a behemoth in the food industry by then, leading more patrons away from diners and onto the Golden Arch's four walls instead. Hungry customers wanted their food prepared rapidly and already wrapped conveniently to go, which gave fast food joints a clear advantage over the more traditional dining system of the diner. Apart from fast food joints, chain restaurants and drive-ins were also winning over more patrons. The diner's popularity had sunk so low that by the end of the 1960s, it was estimated that only 5,000 diners remained in operation. Luckily, the diner was only down, but not out. Its survival into the 1970s and beyond, however, would come from the unlikeliest demographic. Enter in the entrepreneurial Greek immigrant who was providential enough to take a risk on the diner. When many diners closed down during the late 1960s to 1970s, Greek entrepreneurs brought them out from their original owners. This was probably due to their Greeks' intrinsic habit of hanging out at a cafeino, their own version of a cafe. It was a favorite place where they would socialize with each other and catch up on recent events. The Greeks, who migrated to the US, sought to keep the cafeino legacy in their new community, and the closest thing they could acquire back then were the numerous closed-down diners being put up for sale. When the Greeks took over, the diner's menu also drastically changed. The burgers, fries, pies, and sandwiches were still there, of course, but by then, menu items had greatly expanded to include Greek dishes, lamb gyro, pita with falafel, or moussaka. By the early 2000s, other ethnic groups began snapping up their own diner businesses, like immigrants from South Korea, Bangladesh, and Costa Rica, to name a few. These immigrant-owned diners also tended to employ other immigrants from the same country of origin, or perhaps a neighboring country, which led to diverse yet unified communities blossoming around the US. As of today, some of the more renowned diners owned and operated by immigrant entrepreneurs are Neptune Diner in Astoria in Queens, which is a beloved Greek establishment in Greater New York City. Thai Diner in New York, which fusions traditional diner food with Thai twists like Asian greens chowder. And Broadway Diner in Yonkers, that's been run by the same Bangladeshi family for over 20 years now. The diner experienced a significant renaissance after 9/11, when Americans yearned for comfort right in the face of unspeakable tragedy. So people flocked to the diner, where a lingering sense of the familiar gave them solace and reassurance. Since then, the diner has gotten back on its feet once again. One clear sign of this is how global chains like Denny's and IHOP have adopted the diner aesthetic and service, providing that diner culture has already crossed over beyond America. In popular culture, diners are often mainstays in TV sitcoms and series, with the diner appearing prominently in shows like Seinfeld, Gilmore Girls. And of course, who could ever forget that anticlimactic ending of The Sopranos at Tony's favorite diner? Reality TV has also taken a bite of the diner fare, with shows such as Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and American Diner Revival becoming all-time fan favorites at the Food Network. Like all other small and medium-sized food enterprises, the diner also took a hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many had to close shop, but thanks to mobile food delivery apps, many were also able to stay afloat. It's a good thing that 3 years after the pandemic, the restaurant industry is normalizing once again, and it's back to business as usual. And this is especially true for the diner as well. It's impressive to see how much the diner has transformed through so many generations, always influenced by the cultural, economic, and social-political shifts in the landscape. From its very modest origins, wherein a horse was needed to transport it, to now resurging back stronger than ever as a gastronomic staple, the diner is definitely an American icon. Without a doubt, the diner will surely continue to evolve through the years. But one thing is for certain, the diner will never go out of style. To show some support, why not drive down to your favorite neighborhood diner the next time you want to satisfy some cravings? Or better yet, why not try out a new diner for your next long drive? Thank you for watching History of Life. We hope you enjoyed this serving of diner fare and culture. Like this video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to know when the next one comes out. See you in the next video!